open. Good evening, mentors and mentees. It's a wonderful time and an honorable opportunity to actually host this session. So before we go in, we have three delectable mentors on the stool, and I'd like to give a brief introduction. I'm not going to read their full profile, but I'd like to just give a brief introduction to help us understand the high and mighty Iroko and Obeches that we have here. So I'll start. So I'll be biased. They said ladies first, so of course I'll take the lady first. And Mrs. A. Okay, so before I go, I'll just throw a bit more light on how we're going to go, so that it's easy for us to follow as it goes. So I'll expect that we'll have the introductions as we just open. I'm going to read the introductions in a bit. And after the introductions, we're going to give the mentors 5 minutes each to give us, their story of how it has been in the industry. Just throw a bit more light on what you've learned, the failures you've had, what are the habits you've kept up with that has helped you to get to where you are today. I'd like everyone, if you're not speaking, to mute your mics. I can hear conversations from people's homes. Calls or to mute our mics so that we can hear the people who are speaking. And when it's not my turn to speak to, I'm also going to mute my mic as well. So, and then everyone who comes in, we've already automated it so that you come in with the mic muted. So please don't unmute until it's time to speak. So after we've heard from three of them, we'll then take a few questions on, from the different people. So if you have questions as they speak, please don't disrupt the flow of their thinking process, of the thought process. Just put your questions in the chat pane. You'll see the chat pane there. So we'll take your questions when it comes to question time. And I'll read out the questions and then, have them answer as well. So if there's need for you to probably throw more light on the specific questions, we'll ask you to unmute your mic and then, throw more light on the question. So when we're done with the question and answer session, we'll then also give them another 5 minutes to give us sort of like an overview of, ideas on post-COVID, what they think we can improve on, and how they think we should navigate the waters post-COVID-19. So I guess we're all on the same plate. So I'll move on now and just do the introduction. So like I mentioned earlier, I'll start with the lady, Mrs. A, as she's very widely known. Her name is Biodun Adefila. She is the COO of SO&U. Biodun Adefila is the Chief Operating Officer, like I earlier mentioned. Before becoming the COO, she was the Executive Director of Brand Management. She has a rich pedigree and experience that spans decades, during which period she has honed her skills at some of the country's leading advertising agencies. Adefila, through her commitment, focus, and dedication, has been an integral part of the SO&U success story for over 2 decades. She holds an MBA in marketing from the University of Liverpool, UK. And if we were in a hall, I would have said around a rousing ovation, but of course we can't do that now, but we can still do that for those who have their videos on. Interested. So I'll move on to the next person, Mr. Kelechi Nwosu. He is the current MD of TBWA. Kelechi is old, well, older than everyone we know. Rumor has it that the character Beth Cooper from Mad Men TV series was inspired by him, and yeah, he's that old. But he's wise and has been around the industry a long time with almost 3 decades of marketing communications experience, cutting across media and advertising. He's currently in charge of a group of marketing communications firms, including Fuse, Red Media, and TBWA. And a sitting ovation for Mr. Kelechi Nwosu. When I first saw his profile, I was amused. I'm like, this is a very interesting profile. And of course, it's only a profile that you can read of an MD of an advertising agency. You probably will never get this from the MD of a bank or something. So we're in a unique industry. So I'll move on to ID Enang. ID Enang is CEO of Corporate Shepherds. Interestingly, he's someone I've never met but heard a lot about, and so it's an honor to actually be hosting this session with him today. Idorenye is a proven reform-minded business leader with a passion for development economics. Over the course of his illustrious career spanning over 27 years, ID has held key positions of increasing responsibility as at executive management levels across African companies like Guinness, Coca-Cola. He has also been the chief of staff to the Equatorial Africa president. He has been at Samsung as well, and lately L'Oreal, before he went on to become the CEO of Corporate Shepherds. And a sitting ovation for Mr. ID Enang as well. Yeah. So thank you everyone for being very cooperative and muting your mics. We'll now go on now to hear from the mentors. Would like to start with the lady, like I did during the introductions as well. Mrs. A, could you please give us, tell us the story of your advertising life? Let me put it like that. So would like to hear from you. How has it been in the industry? We know that there's lots and lots of pitfalls, but we only see the stellar achievements and the good side of it. But of course, we know that we're currently making a lot of mistakes, and we would like to know how you have risen above those mistakes and still made a very good career in the advertising industry.
All right, thank you very much, Agbons, for the introduction and for introducing me first. Women supporting women. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you everybody for being online. It's a huge honor and privilege to be here, and I hope that the little nuggets that I share will be useful for everyone. So my adventure in advertising, it's been very interesting. So I wasn't always in core advertising. I actually started as a research executive. And then that meant I had to scout the streets of Lagos, doing research, going to people's houses. In fact, there was a day I had a dog set after me because I went to someone's house to do some research. So it's not always been easy. But then again, when you go out, for someone like me, I knew what I wanted, and I knew it wasn't going to be like a walk in the park. But like someone would always tell me, eyes on the ball. And that has been my attitude since day one. So research, I was in research for like 4 years. And then I moved on from the agency I started with. Incidentally, that was Rosabelle Advertising. And then I moved on to the next level. And well, we'll see the difference between agencies and how the structure and leadership can make or break that institution. So I was in this other place, and after a while, I decided that place was not for me. And when I decided to move on, one of the senior people called me and asked me, what he said actually was that I'm a big fish in that place. And why was I going to be a small fish, a small player in the next place? I said to him, I'd rather go as a small fish and be able to swim and be sustainable than stay, you know, a big fish in a small pond. And then when the water dries up on you, what are you going to do? And well, unfortunately, that agency doesn't exist anymore. So it was a good move that I made back then. Now, there was another thing. When I moved, I was a manager. But when I moved to the next place, they said, we can't take you as a manager. You need to be a senior executive. So for somebody else, they might have said, okay, I mean, why would I go down? Why would I step down? But for me, my personality is about the long term, sorry. I always look at the long term. What will I do today to ensure that I have a better tomorrow? Yes, I could have said I didn't want that role. I could have gone elsewhere to be manager, but would I be where I am now? Because I felt also that this new place that I'm going will give me the opportunity of growing. And that is exactly what happened. Now I've been in that place for a while. And incidentally, the growth didn't just come overnight. When I got there, the culture was totally different. Let me also say that my husband is in the industry. And back then, when I was in this other place, he was in inside communications. And in my own agency, by 5 p.m., I had closed, I was home. He comes home like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I'm like, see, are we not in the same industry? What exactly are you guys doing? You know? So, but when I got to my new place, I was closing at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. as well. And that brings me to my second point. As a young person, you should have a long-term view of where we are going and choose a partner that would understand you. Because if your partner doesn't understand you, it will be an obstacle. So he was very understanding because we do the same kind of work. So he's not the kind of person that will complain that he's eating bread and stew every night. Or if he has to say Gary, he settles for it. So holding one another's hand, we've come a long way. My point in bringing that out is that looking at the long term, choose people, choose organizations, choose whatever it is, resources that can ensure that you stand strong and you are able to achieve your own goals as well. Now, my last story, so I can give space to somebody else to talk. In my current place of work, there was something that happened, and I think that actually began my growth. So we had this presentation to a client, and it was our biggest billing client then. So as a senior account executive, I was to go with the MD for this meeting. So as the meeting was on the island, and we were on the bridge, Falomo Bridge, and he asked me a question, some questions I couldn't answer. Of course, he had to call the client to say, we are not coming anymore. And I mean, imagine that it was for him to have taken that decision, it was huge. But we went back to the agency, and then he sat me down, line by line, showed me what to do. And then he said something that I will never forget. He said, if we win together. If you lose, we lose together. And that, you know, kind of defined my experience there. I didn't leave the office till like 1 a.m. that day. He took me to a taxi park so I could go back home. But my point in all of that is that this is someone that could also see the future. Maybe he saw something in me and he thought, okay, let me help her learn. And that also brings about the function or the role of a mentor. He's been a great mentor. I've learned a lot. And I think that also what I've learned is what I also pass on to other people as I try to mentor them. So be focused, get partners that can help you achieve your goals. And if you need to step back one step so that you can go 3 steps further, why not? At least that worked for me, and I'll recommend it to anyone in that situation. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you, Mrs. A. She pulled out a lot of points, which we'll go over much later when the other gentlemen have had their turn. She talked about spousal support for women in advertising. She talked about having a long-term view. She talked about having a mentor. And of course, she also talked about a major challenge that she had while she was still learning the ropes. So we'll go back to all of that, afterwards. But right now, we'd like to hear from Presido himself, Mr. Kelechi Nwosu. So please give us your own remarks. Tell us how you have. I'm trying to look for an interesting word that matches your profile. But of course, I'm not the writer. I can't find. So, okay, just tell us in a straight word. Okay, the floor is yours, Mr. Nwosu.
Thank you very much, Abuma, for the opportunity, and thanks, Biodun, for the insight. I think I work better with a question and answer as I typically am, because my brain is not as organized as Biodun's great brain typically, and especially when I'm looking forward to my evening relaxation. But I can talk a little bit about how I got into the industry. I got in working first for Advertising Techniques Limited, run by Mike Moby at that time, and still runs it now. And it was interesting because I was coming from Unilag. I had just done my postgraduate diploma, and I wanted to get into advertising. A friend of mine whose cousin was actually my eBay, Martin Anyanwu of Nestle. I don't know if anybody remembers him, was a client to Michael Moby, and he gave me a note and said, you know what, go and talk to Michael since you want to join advertising. So I went to Mike Moby's place after my PGD. And I got in there and he said, do you really want to do this? I said, yes, I want to. He said, why do you think you want to do? Anyway, we had a good chat and I found him quite interesting. It was from him I learned how to roll my sleeves. He usually would roll his sleeves. He was a really, really hands-on kind of guy. He had just come from JWT worldwide and he was very American and very gung-ho and willing to break the world. Anyway, so I left after the interviewing. And I called him up about March. Then I was working at Climax. I don't know if anybody remembers Climax. I was once a junk journalist. Don't worry, I won't write anything about you all. So I worked at Climax for a little bit. And I called Mike one day and he said, why are you calling me? I said, but sir, I put in my application. He said, you need to come. Why don't call me from afar? I said, okay. So one lesson is if you want it, get on with it. You know, nobody's going to bring the thing to you. You really need to want it. So that's how I started. And I started on a very humble salary at that time. I can tell you guys, it was about $400 per month. And it was fun, right? Because it was a good job and we were happy. Of course, I got promoted in the next 2 months or so. But I still remember myself with my tie tucked into my shirt with one hand, taking the Molue, when the Molues were fun and for rugged people like us. I didn't understand this thing I'm talking about. Anyway, so that's ATL. And from there, I went on to channels because I felt that channels was an opportunity. I had just finished my master's and I felt channels was an opportunity. Cognate media industry, understand what we're doing. I didn't stay for a long time in channels, and we can talk about that later. I then went on to a place called Zipol. And Zipol was in Mushi, and I remember how I got there. I got there because Mr. Dohuje had given me a note asking me to go and talk to Mr. Lopez, Jide Lopez of Zipol, to work with him. And Mr. Dohuje's thinking was that there was a way we could realign Zipol to become a really Indian agency, because a lot of their clients, Binatone, the ones that do Oreptol, they were making the Indian guys, the whole family, Lalvani family. So when I got into Zipol, I wrote a position paper, and this is 3 years into the industry for me. I wrote a position paper asking that we move Zipol to have an Indian affiliation, but I think I was considered a little bit overzealous by my bosses, and I said, hey, I needed to leave this environment because it was now a net distribution of ignorance. Because when I work on the weekends, they would say, why are you coming to work on weekends? Why? Because I had grown up working with Mike. Every day was work. Anyway, so I said, okay, let me see what happens in the larger agencies. And that's how I got into JWT LTC then. And I went to LTC, and LTC said, oh, no, we like you, but we think from your profile, we're not going to make you a group head. This was in 1995, after the whole Abiola Wahala. We'll make you a group head because we think that we worked at Zipol, and you know, they used to all laugh at Zipol. Zipol, Mushi, that's where offices were. There's a little bit of but the thing is this, and this is another lesson. Never forget your humble beginnings. What I learned from the Indians, working with them, a lot of us may not learn it in 20 years working in multinationals. For instance, I learned that the Indians go to Guardian and they say, we want inches. We're going to buy 20,000 inches for a year. Give us a discount. That was amazing. I learned that when an Indian is going to a new newspaper or a new media, they're going to there and say, look, we want 50%. You're not getting anybody, nobody's buying anything from you. You better give us 50%. So if there's any little hard negotiation I learned it from the Indians who work with Zipol. That's the sort of thing. So in life, I believe it's about, even in the so-called tough situations and the situations that are unexpected, you learn. And our experiences are better off. They're much more variegated and richer when you're learning from the high and the so-called low. So I had that fun at Zipol, like I said. Then I was at LTC, JWT, I went to work with, and that's why ID, my client, ID was in charge of sats and bra, skirt and blouse. And then I grew in LTC. LTC was amazing. It was better structured than the agencies I had worked. They were larger, they were far more ambitious. We had many more people. It was fun. It was a good family. And But I had to leave. I had to leave in 2001 because at that point, there were two situations. There's one particular. One was I was being considered for executive management, but LTC, a couple of people on the board felt maybe he's too young. Maybe he's that. Again, that's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes it's not the right place. It's not the right time. You don't have to stay necessarily because of all that. But it's always good to think about where you're going to next. And like Biodun, I went from being a director of business at LTC, overseeing account planning and account management, to become an account director. I literally went to TWA Concept in 2001 to be account director. Now, designations often matter in our businesses because people worry. As an account director in TBWL, my salary was higher than my salary when I was director of business and all that at LTC. But one of the reasons why I left was that TBWA was coming into running MTN, and I knew that the world was going to go in the way of the telcos. It was an important step for me to understand that part of the industry, be part of it. So I was incidentally the pioneer account director for MTN when we launched in 2001. And it was a great deal of fun at that time. In fact, I woke up a couple of times doing MTN presentation in my dreams to the chagrin of my wife, who has since chastised me thoroughly over such incidents. That's one of the things about advertising. It gets into you, you become part of you, you begin to speak it, you dream it, and those are lessons to go. So I've been at TBWA. I think they have some juju that they used to hold me down, but I'm having fun. I became managing director in 2005. Just on a general note, one of the things I think I emphasize with my colleagues and anybody who cares to listen is this: our business is not a business of glamour. So when people say we're in the glamorous business, it actually irritates me personally. Glamour is something, it's good. You can be glamorous, you cannot be glamorous. But the point is, we're in the business of creativity. We're in the business of innovation. We're in the business of strategy. We're in the business of thinking. A client will hire you if you are not a glamorous person, but your brain is working better than anybody else. It doesn't mean that you don't need to be well-dressed. I mean, we grew up in this industry wearing funny ties. We used to call them color separation ties. Do you remember when they call you, we'll wear a jacket that time, even with my molu, I will hang my blazer looking good. And they were wearing shirts and so they just like, what's wrong with all these agency people? How does it contribute to the sales volume? Particularly ID will tell Kelechi, let's go and eat amala. What's all this? This is not what so my relationship with ID is not based on my tie. It doesn't remember any tie. And because so it's important to remind us what we are. So we are about grit, we're about intelligence. That's what we need to emphasize now. We're about learning. So continuous learning is critical in our business. Just learning about people. That's something, a gap I see with us. We need to learn about our environment, our context. We also need to be strong, I think, in pushing Nigerian growth and made in Nigerian brands, creating things. I think somehow along the line, we're thinking about it, but as a country, I think we're happy to import. So a lot of things we import are good, but they're not particularly helpful. They won't resonate with our people, even some of the brands. So we need to start working with local Nigerian to be able to make brands that will scale in Africa at least and in parts of the world. So guys, that's me. One more point that I often make to my colleagues is that you're sharp, you're sharp. There's also this whole thinking right now that the younger you are, the sharper you are. It's questionable. I see that a lot of, that's why my people who wrote that CV, they say I'm very old. Don't mind them all. I agree. But one thing is that once you're learning, once you're bringing up once you're updating what you know, I mean, if you use ID as an example, for instance, or any of us here, Biodun or myself, part of the thing is that we've always struggled, worked hard from when we were far younger to learn about ourselves, our context. Nobody needs to know everything. Nobody is a genius. Nobody's a genius and all of that stuff. But you need to keep updating. And just because you are a so-called millennial doesn't mean that you know everything. Actually, some things nobody will expect you to know. So it's important that you blend the experience, especially relevant experience, but also keep learning as you go on. Thanks. I hope I haven't exceeded my 5 minutes. Thank you.
You did, but it was an interesting one, so I'm sure we all learned from it. I particularly picked a few things. I picked the color separation ties, and I know that we've moved on from the era of color separation tie. We then moved on to the era of Timberland. I remember while at Inside, all the creative guys had Timberland on. I don't know what era we are in now, but I'm sure we've moved past the era of Timberland as well. So moving on, we'll now like to hear from ID. Someone I've admired from afar, but I haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I once had someone who worked with him, who was a friend of mine. I used to make so much noise about him. No, you need to meet him. He's such a nice person and all of that. So over to you, Mr. ID. Let's hear from you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, colleagues, and good evening, everyone. Honestly, sometimes it's tough to, like Casey said, tough to speak after notable personalities like Biodun and Kelechi. Kelechi has not told you guys the real truth. He's an Aba man, he's an Igbo man. Forget all those Indian, he's even more Indian than the Indian. He will negotiate you out of anything you want. So all that Indian thing, I should expose him a lot more, but I'll manage so I can have dinner. You'll call my wife and tell her not to give me food. Well, friends, thank you for having me, TBF. And where do I start? Let me try and keep this in very reasonable summaries. Number one is to say that where I am now and where I started my corporate journey, I've been through 15 roles. So you may want to call them 15 roles that I've run through, and my career started from Guinness, or rather maybe ELF. I'll put ELF Nigeria, where I did my youth service, and I also had a stint after my service with ELF before I joined Guinness as a management trainee. At Guinness, I had 4 roles at Guinness, and then I moved on to Coca-Cola. I had 7 roles Coca-Cola. Then I joined Cadbury, Samsung, and L'Oreal. Each of those other ones had 1 role each, which is obvious. I've gotten into possible management roles. I mean, executive management as in being CEO, GM type roles. But the strength of it is actually speaking to how and what made my career blossom. To be honest, some of you might find this very impossible to hear, but when people tell me about failures, I say one thing, I can't really put a finger on failures, and not because I'm perfect. Please try to give me some space. What I'll say to you is that none of the roles I got in all through my career were made of 2 things. Number 1, divine orchestration, and number 2, planning. When I started my career at Guinness and I joined Guinness, I said to myself, 5 years from now, I'd like to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Number 1, to be married. I would have live in a flat. I'll be a line manager. And I'll also be considered worthy to take up an international assignment. There were things that I put in there as benchmarks, and I'll tell you, in 5 years or less than 5, I ticked all the boxes, and I had to open a new vista. But all of that was done very prayerfully. It was just about the time that, I joined the Lateran Assembly under Pastor Bakare, and I began to see, I joined Lateran in 92, and so it kind of shaped the way, and it kept driving this thing about excellence, and to a large extent, it influenced the way I took my career and I took my person. So if you want to look at my career and the way it's spiraled, it has spiraled in that same space, to the extent that when I left Guinness and I moved to Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola for me, between Coca-Cola and Guinness, 7 years, 11 years, 18 years, very solid foundation, was more or less the foundation and the building. And that's where one of the biggest things that helped me was the launch of September. And that enabled a lot of things. And why would I say that failures have been almost negligible? Simply because I ask questions. I do not in any way look down on anybody. Casey will tell you, I mean, working together as colleagues, all guys in LTC and agency guys that have worked together across board, not one time was I ever viewing them as a client. we were brothers, and we were friends. And to this day, it's been like that. So I'm open, I'm vulnerable. And so they show me the pitfalls. And when you're open and that vulnerable, trust me, people will chime in and tell you what you need to know. And that is the foundation that kept me all the way through. By the time I got to Cadbury, the turnaround for Cadbury was really probably the most difficult part of my career. But thank God for 18 years of learning. And Cadbury, you all know, was down the hill. It was, I always describe it as the Titanic. It was just waiting for the mast. And the mast was just what was obvious. But we turned that around, and it was through people. So people drive results, and the way you manage people make the difference. I never looked down on any of my colleagues, and they helped me journey through that. And between the day I resumed in Cadbury to the time I left, I spent 90 days. I went across the entire country, spoke to 140 or 50 of my team members, then from the gate man in Kano, in Sokoto, in each of the depots, to my direct reports. Each of them had a space to tell me, what would you do if you're in my shoes? Because they were all my seniors. And that's why, you know, one of the things I'll tell you, failure was far distant because there was a buy-in. You can tell me the inclusive leadership, but you will always succeed if you see that you are vulnerable and allow people get into your life and help you on that journey. Many of us tend to close up. You close up at your own peril because nobody's going to tell you. And if you are sitting up there, your high horse, you need to calm down. And those were lessons I learned that took me into Samsung. When I joined Samsung, we barely had 20 employees. And I said one thing to them. I told them, number one, I was not going to join if we were going to keep the office on the ground floor. And I can say this with every sense of humility. I said to them, if they were going to retain that second floor, that ground floor, I was never going to join. Number two, I told them I was a big fish and they needed to hire me, they would need a crane. Number three, and I said, if I was to join them, there were certain things that I did not want to see. Why? Because I understood the Asian culture and that was not going to work for me. But I negotiated all of that ahead. And when I joined Voila, I met everything. Number one, they had not, apart from the expatriates, most of the Nigerians were on contract. They didn't even have confirmations. Number two, most of them, none of them had any health insurance. There was nothing like that. And I could go on. And I said, this is not going to happen under my watch. And I went, put on, what do you call it, Liberty Blue or something, and I placed everybody on gold. Now, why did I do that? It made the people endure themselves to tell me, this is the way we need to go. The success story, I met Samsung at $80 million. I left Samsung 2 years plus after the top line revenue was $206 million. Had nothing to do with ID, had nothing to do with brilliance, but it had to do with people. And I can tell you from there, even to L'Oreal, moving the business and doing all that, it came simply because of appreciating people and letting people be the centerpiece, because that's what God expects of us, to love your neighbor as yourself and be your brother's keeper. But when we get into corporate, because of the gesture of trying to be on top and not be the lower person, you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want anybody to see that you don't know. Like I always say to everybody, I don't know is an answer. And you can take it to the bank. So in closing, I'll tell you, there are certain things that drove me. There are 5 principles. Number one, I won't do it is not in my diary. I can't do it is never in my diary or my lexicon. But the ones you'll find always, I want to do it. How do I do it? And finally, I will try to do it. And then I just do it. That has been the picture of my drive. And I'm just giving that as an opportunity. If you ask questions, I'll be able to go into specifics. At the end, it just made, by the grace of God, my life very purposeful and meaningful. Thank you for having me, and I hope that kind of sums the entire gamut of my 30+ years in place.
Interesting. Thank you, ID. This is really an eye-opener to me, and I know that it will be same as well for a lot of people listening. We already have questions pouring in, but I'd like to ask a few questions before I start reading out the questions from the house. And the first one will be, what is the biggest challenge that you've had in the industry? So as an advertising practitioner or as a marketing practitioner? what is the biggest challenge that you have had? And how did you surmount this challenge? So I'll throw this open. I'll start with Mrs. A. So if she can speak to this, say in like 3 minutes, so that we'll also have the gentlemen speak to this as well.
All right, thank you again. Biggest challenge, I think for me, that would be about having to move from a culture, like I explained when I started this conversation. There was a way that I knew how to do stuff. And then when I moved to my current place of work, where advertising was really practiced as it should, it was a bit of it wasn't easy. Okay, it was challenging in the sense that here I was having started my career as a research person, and then here I am being a brand manager, brand facing, client facing. And so even the culture of the way things were done, I had to relearn stuff. So for instance, I will get to work like 8:30 a.m., that was resumption. And by 10 p.m., I've not had breakfast, I've not had lunch, you know? So it was tough, but then it kind of helped to grow the person that I am today. So challenges, I mean, I had to learn. In fact, I think that was when everybody started to use computers. And by the time I got into my place of work, they had sent out all the secretaries. So you had to handle your own secretariat by yourself. So it was also about learning new things. So for me, it was getting into the deep of marketing communications. And would I call that overly challenging? Not really, not quite so. It was really about adapting to a new environment. And that would happen for anybody that wants to grow. There will be no need to adapt. So it's about your state of mind. It's like somebody will say, it's a mind job. It's about the mind. What kind of attitude do you have? Are you able to learn? Are you able to adapt? Things will come your way. So it depends on how you want to address them, how you want to tackle them. And like ID just said, ask questions. I think out of if anything saved me and made me able to be who I am today, is because I was able to ask questions, a lot of questions. In fact, my dad said to me many years ago that, see, when you are in school, if you don't understand anything, you may be in SS3 and it's someone in JS1 that understands that thing. Go and ask. It does not mean that it will be written on your head that, oh, you didn't know it, you had to ask a JS person. Even if they did, that knowledge is yours from that time onward. So asking a lot of questions worked for me. Never losing sight of who or what I wanted, eyes on the ball always worked for me. Aiming for the top. Like someone will say to me, aim for the skies, you may reach the treetops, you know? So just go and aim high as you can go. And then and then of course, step by step, you get to where you want to go. And also, I had bosses that were willing to train. I had one that would tell you, you have to be a sponge. You know the baby sponge that is able to absorb water. He will tell you, be like a sponge, absorb everything that you can, learn from anyone that you can. And then relationship building. In this business, relationship building is very, very important. You cannot go far if you are not building relationships. So sometimes it's not always about maybe how well you know your job. Yes, that is very important. In fact, that's the entry point. You must know your job. You must be capable. You must be able to add value to clients. They must be able to know that you can change situations for them. So it's not about meeting the clients and telling them how nice the weather is. No, you must be capable. But then build relationships with them that goes beyond the transactions, that goes beyond the briefs that you are actioning. Friendships that will translate even beyond that place of work. So now I have clients that I've worked for years ago that no longer are in the company that they were, but we remain friends. And that's how you grow over the years. So don't throw away relationships, have a very positive attitude, aim for the top, and nothing be unstoppable. So those
Thank you,
would be
Mrs.
my
A.
thoughts on
Interesting. You've
Yeah.
spoken to a very important part of building relationships. I mean, that's pretty much a very a big reason or big lesson that we should all take from here. ID, can you give us one big challenge that you faced in the industry and how you surmounted it? Just one.
You're
We can't
muted,
hear
sir. You are muted. You are muted, sir.
Sorry. Sorry. I like I did say, my biggest challenge would be my Cadbury time. Just putting it in context, it starts with money. I met a business that was 17 billion in deficit and 6 billion trade debt as commercial director, and the brands were meant to come to life. And this was at a time when you would see Bombita and TomTom were the flagship brands, and the rest of the brands that you found there were not making money. And so it was really about choices. You know, choices define what you do, and choices define what you get. It was very tough. Folks having to hear me go through a process that had to bring, to reduce the size of TomTom, reducing from that 5+ gram sweet to one that was about 4 grams, and being able to take some leverage, being able to stop Cadbury Breakfast Show on television. Ben Bruce himself was not happy with me. I stopped all of those things and I canceled promotions. And we just basically had to focus on getting the brands alive and knocking out all the goodies and the peppermints a lot of you liked, just to be focused and then revalidating. Now, it was tough because one, we had one agency running with us, but at some time, another tough choice was I was not prepared to continue having one. There was nothing wrong with it. I mean, I met it as an institution. All the brands were in one basket, and I said it didn't make sense that we'll keep it in one basket. Second choice was to put a pitch, and that brought on 141 to take on beg your pardon, TomTom. And suffice it to say that we now had to build the brands within the pillars of what we expected. Fast forward to 3 years after, we were out of the doldrums. Cadbury bounced back again, and each of the brands became what they were, flagships. Bombvita, we went to the extent of opening up a new vista. Thanks to my friend Larry Adisa, I had to pull him in to start a campaign on Ramadan. That in itself was a big challenge because internally, everybody was telling me, you can't touch religion, you can't touch. But we had Ramadan Kareem and we ran for 3 months. I tell you something, for the first time in Cadbury in a long time, we outsold the factory. 20 grams was in scarce a commodity, especially in the north. But we went into activations, brought the brands alive, and all the agencies chimed in. Rosabel, 141 Worldwide, and all the activation agencies. We all went to the consumer while ensuring that our customers were enabled and made sure that the supply chain was there. And guess what? We bounced back in terms of revenues. And well, I could tell you the story is there for you to see. 3 years after, Cadbury was back, and then we started extending the brands. And of course, we took TomTom the price up. After 6 years, the price of TomTom was never increased. What we took up, I can tell you, in my time, I took prices up more than 4 or 5 times. And it was just using football as the leverage. So marketing works. A lot of things that we do, the brands can work if you have valuable insights. Those challenges could look very surmounting because people will not be on your side, especially management. But if you know what you want to do, use the insights, drive with people, ask questions, and then go for it. The last word I'll put, to make choices as a leader, especially in that kind of space, whether agency or client, you need courage. You need to have loads of courage. Courage was one thing that I didn't lack or have in short supply. And that's why, you know, my colleagues and I were able to make it. Thanks.
Interesting. Thank you. I picked out two very important things. The first one is that branding and marketing can work if you have valuable insight. And of course, you need to have loads of courage. Trust me, it's very important because sometimes you may have the best idea, and if you don't have the courage to sell it, it will die on arrival. So it's an interesting thing that, important thing that we all should learn. So I'll take a few questions from the people in the house. So the first one is from Ben Johan. He says the advertising industry as it is now is in a comatose situation, mainly because of the digital revolution and the fact that to be clients now, I mean, okay, to the fact that clients now open in-house agencies and shops. So how have your agencies and he meant here TBWA and SO, and you have been able to survive the terrible times of clients opening their own in-house shops and in-house agencies? So if the oldest and wisest man can speak to this thing, the oldest and the wisest man.
Don't know about that too. Yeah, you're just setting me up. Because it's not coterminous. You can be old without being wise.
And that's why I said the oldest and the wisest.
Okay, so I mean, the question is about the clients setting up their own units, right? And digital being the main thing. Is that correct? That's what the question is, isn't it?
Yes, but the main issue is with clients setting up their own in-house shops and their own in-house agencies. So for most clients now, they have their own in-house agency, so to say. So how are agencies, been weathering the storm? How is TBWA doing? How are you coping with this?
I don't think that all clients, most of the really big FMCG multinational clients don't really have their in-house agencies, okay? I think that some clients will have some parts of some disciplines in their units, in their in-house, but most of them don't have that. But as for us as TBWA, and I'm sure for most of the agencies, it's a challenge. The big challenge is how do you get new businesses, one, and how do you also diversify what you're offering? Our business model as agencies have been challenged. Our model has been challenged for a long time. I usually, when I talk to some AppCon guys, what I teach, I tell them it's long live advertising, or advertising is dead, but long live advertising. Our business we've kept a model that hasn't really worked over a long period. So for most of us, even before the COVID situation, there was the reality that we needed to start looking at our business models. When I say business models, the question is, what do we offer to clients? Are we in tune with what clients require? I'm not sure that even the current, sometimes we talk about digital, and digital is an offering, is a channel. Most agencies now who are worth their salt will need to understand what digital is about. It's like you're doing work and you don't understand TV or whatever. It's just one part. But even apart from digital, there's data, there's analytics, there's measurement. So how are the agencies how are we supposed to thrive? I think we should put our focus on outcomes. One of the things, and I said this to a couple of my colleagues, one of the things that has affected us as agency people is we don't measure. So people like a client, ID is asking for how many tons of Bonvita that was sold. He's not asking for how many ads you ran on NTA or on digital for him. His assignment when he was in Cadbury is not to go and check the total number of ads you've run. That's just a way to a particular end. He's looking for outcomes. Outcomes are what is the client's marketing objective. So as agencies, what I ask my colleagues and a lot of us in the industry must be thinking about is how do we tap into the problems, the challenges that clients are having? How do we do that? The other part is how do we look at our offering, and as creative and innovative people, how do we diversify that offering to bring value to the client? That's just one of the way to go. But it's not a shotgun answer. It's not. If I had all the answers, I probably will have all the clients in the country. It's not an easy spectacle all over the world. So advertising agencies are being challenged to change their business model, to review it, to make it much more relevant to where we are. Of course, digital is part of it, but it's not just about digital. It's also about being able to achieve what the clients want to achieve. I hope that is giving you some satisfaction. Hello.
Ben, can you unmute your mic and then tell us if this was fine, if this answers your question?
Okay, so thanks a lot, Agbons. I've been in the advertising industry myself. I'd worked with Young and Rubicam, I'd worked with Wonderman, and a couple other agencies, and right now I'm on the client side. But something that's very key right now is the fact that most of these agencies are closing shop. Now, I know for one that recently Young and Rubicam had closed, and several other units under Young and Rubicam too is closing, even on the global scale, like you said. So the thing now is, how are these agencies surviving right now? Because it appears that the industry has changed beyond digital and every other thing that's coming, and COVID, like you said. These agencies sooner or later would have to move, because as we speak, I know of companies that now, okay, I'll give an instance where I currently work. They used to work with an agency that has also closed, but I run the team in-house, and myself and my team do virtually everything the agency will do. So that's a whole lot away from an agency already, and it keeps happening in several areas. I know Glow started this long time ago. They were the first organization to come out with this model in Nigeria, and a lot of other people started copying it also. So this is my pain point. This is the question I'm asking.
I think you've spoken to
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Ben.
Is this, and if you go to the Glow example, the question is, has it really worked? Glow has always maintained an agency. I think Biodun and Clover are still working for them. I've worked for Glow. Even when Glow had an
Oh, I think Kelechi has connection challenges. Can we still hear him?
No, I can't hear him either.
Okay, Mrs.
If I may just, if I may speak to that, what I would like to say is that Glow, for instance, like Ben mentioned, even though they have in-house people, in fact, they hire expatriates to come and work, but they still maintain two agencies working with them. S1U is with them, Extreme is also with them as we speak. In fact, before Glow, it was actually PZ, as far as I know, that started this in-house agency thing many, many years ago. But now I don't know how well that worked for them, because now they also have agencies. So I guess along the way, people just try and see what works, and when it doesn't work anymore, they move on. But to the question of how do we survive, I think it's about relevance. What relevance are you creating for your clients? Are you waiting for them to do you briefs? Or are you understanding the market, the people, and how you can create solutions? Because at the end of the day, we are solutions providers. So what solutions are you providing? How relevant is it to the client? Because only an idiot client will see an idea that works and he will say it doesn't want. So are you relevant? And then how timely are you delivering the solutions that you say you are providing? Yes, digital is there, but digital does not run in isolation. It's still based on ideas. It's still based on people. It's still based on what works for the consumers at the end of the day. So I would say relevance is very important, and then co-creation. So we see a lot of these online influencers and entertainers eating into the big pie that used to be advertising. What are we doing about that? Are we just sitting at the corner of our offices crying? Or are we making plans to see how we can co-create with them and see what comes out of that? So like Kelechi said, nobody has all the wisdom and ideas, but if you say, you map out an idea and you say this will work for your brand or for your clients, then call in the people that would be able to make it work. So instead of operating in a zero billing position, you are able to bring in other people, and together you add value, you create solutions, and you remain relevant. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. A. Before ID speaks, I just want to chip in that I'm in digital, and we realize that a lot of people actually just run campaigns without a strategy for the sake of running campaigns, and they get digital influencers and all of those people for the sake of it, without recourse to the brand personality, the brand strategy, and where the brand is headed. So for them, they just want to make a lot of noise. So it's not all well and good, you know, as they make you see. So not everything on Twitter sells products. So I'll just leave it at that. So ID, please speak to us.
Before I speak, I'm sorry I got caught off. I don't know what's happening with my network, but I'm sure that Biodun has dealt with the subject quite well.
Yeah, sure.
The other point to be made is, and I know the gentleman was worried about the survival of agencies, you must also put it in context. You have a really poor economy. The best marketing practitioners in this country are the ones who are in FMCGs. If you got all industry, producing what they're producing. If you think about the categories in our country, you've got telco, you've got banks, you've got FMCGs, you've got quite other service industries, a few and far in between. You don't have enough. Actually, the marketplace is very shallow if you are really honest about it. Now, the challenge with us as marketing practitioners is that we need to step back and go and start doing some vertical integration, really just holding companies and making sure we help them grow. That's what I'm talking about, the business model. That's part of what Biodun is talking about, being able to be proactive, perhaps to sow some skin and be part of industries to grow. There are not even enough marketeers to go around. And now, like you say, it's getting tougher. People are bringing it in-house. But one of the things I told the clients in these COVID times is that, like you say, in my place, when things are difficult, that's why you need senior native doctors. The time for people to need the proper strategies, agencies that have strategy is now. If people go back and they just hire people and they don't have the right people, it may or may not work for them. It becomes a little bit more competitive. So there's always room. It's about relevance. It's about us as people pushing what our business model is. It's also about the clients on the marketing side thinking about what value they want to get from agencies.
Okay, ID.
Well,
thank you, Kelechi.
Thank you. Thanks, Agbons. Let me seize the honors to call you Agbons. My colleagues have spoken well, but I want to go to the fundamentals. You see, I'm an industry player. One of the things that we must look ourselves in the eyes and tell ourselves the blatant truth, we lack discipline. And we lack discipline because we do not have institutions. And that's why you have sectoral groups. The sectoral groups, rather than sitting together and dealing with issues internally and coming up with strong positions as professionals, the attitude is a dog eat dog. There is no way in heaven's creation if we sit as professionals and no, listen, there are quacks everywhere. My wife is a medical, she's a doctor. There are quack doctors, there are quack optometrists, there are quack advertisers, there are quack clients. Quackery is everywhere. But this industry will never move forward until we put our ducks in a row. Number one, sectoral groups should live up to their billing, AAAN, Advan, etc., etc. How many of us, by reason of the act, respect the fact that we must register with the Institute of Marketing? Marketing is a profession. Advertising is a profession, and we should act like professionals. But when we start acting like gutter-based people, everybody sitting from the shop, any client will abuse anything. When purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. Until we go down to the very roots of it. Kelechi was once AAAN president. I was once Advan president. I was chairman heads of advertising sectoral groups. I can speak on every reasonable authority that the problem the industry is facing is because of the lack of discipline and professionalism, period. Government can be the next stage, environment can be the next, but as core, do we see ourselves as professionals or we are just carrying portfolios? Dog eat dog. All those things will eat us. But let me leave the stage for my guys.
Interesting discourse. I'll just move on to the next question as because of time. I mean, this is simple, but I'm still going to read it so he doesn't feel marginalized. It says, to be considered as someone in MarComms, do you have to be in an agency? For instance, can copywriters on the client side be considered as advertising practitioners? Kelechi, can you please answer that for us?
Yes, you know that APCON recognizes that. APCON recognizes that it's for registered practitioners. So if you are on the client side and you are a copywriter and you've gone through the training and you have the requisite, that's what ID was talking about. APCON recognizes that you can register as a copywriter, as a professional. It does that. In fact, APCON recognizes that you can have in the licensing regime, which because of the politics of APCON hasn't come. There's an opportunity for a small, what they call consultants to be licensed by APCON. APCON has taken that into account.
Interesting. So now you know, Ntonga, I hope we answered your question. So moving on, there's another question. As a young founder of a small agency with innovative ideas and strategies, looking to make meaningful relationships and partnerships to push these initiatives, what's the piece of information you wish you knew while trying to get the big clients in a smaller agency? So what's the one piece of information you wish you knew back then that would have helped you get bigger clients?
Okay, is that for me as well? ID is relaxing.
I'm going to come to ID. His questions are, you know, they are boiling.
I mean, that's the thing. One thing that I knew if I had known a few years ago, I think it's about reputation. And the thing with our industries, we tend to pursue reputation the same way, which is not quite well. So if I'm a small agency or a medium agency and I want to grow, pick up a zero client. It might be an NGO, it might be something. Just have some original thinking, you know, that will bring you to the fore. That gives you heft when you come to the table. It does give you heft. Even if it's a research, pick up a case study, pick up something that is fresh and new that will give you some recognition and respect. Don't buy a new car, don't buy a new tie. Those things are the things that we got missed in. Get a new line of thought, be a thought leader in some part of it, and be honest that you've learned and you've given that to the industry. I think clients and friends will recognize that and give you referrals based on that. So I think a lot of our businesses, good businesses come via referrals and what you know. So that can help, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Kelechi. I think I'd like to just add a bit of information to that as well. So as someone who has grown an agency from scratch to, a sustainable level, I'd like to also say that when you specialize, it also does help your agency. So you can't be everything to everybody. So you need to specialize and, you know, attend to a particular niche. For example, from the day we started, we were very clear that we only work with professional services firms and specialized product brands. So we're not going to go after FMCGs. So when you have a niche, you focus on your niche, it also helps you to grow. So if somebody in your area is looking for an agency in your area, they'll definitely want to work with you because you have the experience, you've done your research in that area, and you can speak to their challenges. So I hope that helps. Okay, so I'll take the next question, and this is for ID. Can you share your experience of growing the Bonvita brand in the North? As the Northern market is quite peculiar with a lot of challenges and difficult to penetrate for a lot of brands.
Well, I think every single marketer, brand manager sits from the standpoint of using insights. The success of growing Bonvita in the North was nothing other than being able to understand the role each pack, each product plays within the context of the consumer. Now, and then that takes cognizance what their level of affordability. You can make all of that ready. And once you do, you then appositely identify with the things that make the people there want to use you or consume you. More or less, I call it permission marketing. So what did we do differently with Bonvita? You know, at that time, there were several SKUs. You had the refill, you had the can, 450 gram, you had the refill. We had 20 grams. We had, now it's a long time I left that place, so I might not remember all the grammage. But one thing I can say to you is that we made sure that the culture in the North, with the Mishai culture, coming out of the Ramadan would require you to look at it more widely and say, I need a 450 gram team because of the nature of consumption, which is around multi-serves. So you'll have the 450 gram, the 900 gram, I beg your pardon, would be the main SKU to drive across the channels. Then when we come to the Mishai, we'll go there with 20 grams. So 20 grams, it was polarized. We had 920, single serve, multi-serve. And then the 450 grams will only sit in the middle when we are getting into stores like your groceries, etc. So the foot runners for us, the foot runner pack, SKU, stock keeping unit, was the 20 gram. Because again, in terms of outlay, cash, folks are not going to have money to buy a can of Bombita, but they'll have enough money to go to the next Malam and pick up a 20 gram, instantly serve themselves and get refreshed or rejuvenated, and that goes on. So you find that that was really, it was a strategy behind it, and we put a lot of retail focus into it, whilst we downplayed the need to push volumes with the wholesale. It was more about channel management and understanding the opportunistic nature of the consumer in each of the states. I dare say to you that what happened in Abuja was very different from what happened in Kaduna. And so we approached Kaduna differently from Abuja. We approached Maiduguri differently. And one thing that I must tell you guys, let me round up with this. When I joined, I found that we didn't have northern salesmen or marketers. And one thing I said to HR was, if you can't get me northerners to sell in the north, forget it. So I didn't recruit anyone. When we had openings in sales, I said to them, go look for, there must be northerners. At the end, I ended up having northerners. A lot of the guys that came in, about 5, 6 of them, were equally in each of the states. So these guys understood the terrain. It was normal for them. They were living their normal lives, as against taking a guy from the west to go and sit in Taraba. He has no clue. He cannot speak the language. And all of those barriers were eliminated because, again, I'm coming back to the place of people. We understate and underplay people, but people very key in getting you the successes you need. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to that, this is also a similar question, knowing that you've done a lot of experientials with the Bromvita brand. So someone is asking, what's the future of experiential marketing given the current pandemic? You know, we're going to be doing social distancing for a while. So what's the future of experiential agencies?
You know, one of the things that marketers fall into is this trap of what is the future? What is the future? My grandmother did a lot of experientials. Those days she would say, come, bring your palm. She'll put you inside her hand. I go lick and salt today. That was experiential. You know, we get into all this grammar and we disturb ourselves. Let's cut it down to brass tacks. If you don't have a sense that somebody must actually see how to navigate something, that's experiential. It's going to be here till Jesus comes. So there's nothing called future. Jesus himself even made the experiential. When he turned water into wine, it was experiential because there was a need. And if you don't understand it, you can't. Our problem is that we are sometimes intellectually lazy. A lot of clients just sit down and waiting for agency, go and bring the thing. They think they are talking to errand boys. They should just roll up their sleeves and enter the market. The guts of the business is in the market, not on PowerPoint. That's the reason. So people are, what is the future? There's no future. The future is here. Future was
Thank you. So we have a few people with their hands raised. So we'll take them. When I call your name, you'll just unmute your mic and then ask your question. So we'll start with Tomori Uriel. Can you please unmute your mic and ask your question? Tomori, are you still here? Tomori, you have your hands raised. Are you still here? Okay, so I'll take another question since he's not ready. Well, I think a lot of them are asking some of the questions that we've answered before. Someone is asking, Kelechi, what was your most memorable moment as an account director on the MTN Nigeria account? What was your most memorable moment as an account director on the MTN Nigeria account?
That one is a difficult one. I don't know what's most memorable in terms of what, happiness, sadness, or joy, what. But I think there have been many, many moments. And because of the way my nature is, if I stall the moments, my head probably will explode. But if there's one I remember, is sitting with Afame Dozier, marketing director in 2000 and when was 9/11? Was 2011, right? Hello?
Yeah, sure. 9/11 was 2011.
Yeah, well, it was 2000. Well, when it happened, we were actually having a meeting with a client and there goes. It was 2001. Yes, everything crashed. So network had problems. He was trying to reach his brothers and his family in New York. That moment, for me, it was like, wait a minute, why are we even doing this meeting? What are we even doing here? This whole thing is vanity, as I say. We're just like talking about next best station, next campaign. It does allow us, for me, the lesson is just to be grounded. Like ID said, yes, the future, we need to hold our nerve. I think that's the important thing that we must learn. And in when things happen, we need to hold our nerve no matter what happens. And optimism is a great thing in our industry. It's something that ID's talked about courage, but I think it's courage and also optimism, because the sky has been falling down every day since I joined this industry. We started with digital is going to kill us, is finishing us. And 2 years ago, I attended a course where Mr. Ekunifokoli, one of our greatest, spoke. And he said, digital is good, but guys, let's go back to the basics of marketing. Start with clear segmentation, start with your proposition, then you begin to talk about digital. So it's a lesson for us. A lesson is that life will look like it's going to overwhelm us. The COVID thing looks like it's going to crash everything, but people will get on. Life will move on. ID was talking about experiential. Experiential is not one thing. We need to just be a little bit sharper to think about how to go across. That's why we're human beings. We are gifted with intellectual capability when we utilize it. If we don't utilize it, it'll be like Nigeria with continuous potential energy, and we will be there. But we have it. I saw on CNN today, Keith Urban had a driving show. Doesn't require too much intelligence. He's doing a show and people driving their car, social distancing. So experiential, it will continue in very many ways. It's about us moving forward and not getting stopped by it. That's part of the thing in our industry, actually. Sometimes there's too much, and it comes from both clients and agency. We say, oh, we don't hold our nerve. The world is going to crash. Oh, no. Honestly, there's nothing happening that hasn't happened before. In 1918, there was a pandemic, which you all remember. The world, 50 to 100 million people died, and the world moved on. They have another pandemic. So, sorry, I think I rambled a bit there, but hey.
Interesting insights. Sure. So we have Toka's hand raised. Toka, will you unmute your mic and ask your question? Toka, we have your hand raised. Okay, if you are not ready, I'll take the next questions that they've dropped. Somebody has mentioned there that they are a small agency consulting firm, and one of the challenges they have is people trampling on their intellectual property rights. So how can you advise? I mean, what advice do you have? I'll like Mrs. A to speak to this. What advice do you have on how to deal with this? And when should they send in their proposals? And I mean, what is the next step? What is the perfect time to send in your proposal to be sure that your intellectual property rights will not be taken? Mrs. A, are you still here?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm here. I was trying to unmute my mic. Okay, so it's not a question that has a simple or a single answer. And that's because intellectual property, it's even an area that most of us are not too enlightened about, and that's the truth. I attended a session talking about intellectual property a few months back, and it's amazing the kind of things that we give away for free to clients that we don't even know. So I think it was Kelechi or ID that was saying something about us really getting into, this is our business, we must know it in and out. Now, going back to the question of a small agency and intellectual properties, when is the right time to put in your proposal? It would depend on the kind of clients that you are working with. What kind of relationships do you have with them? So you don't just jump in bed with everybody or anybody. You need to understand who exactly that you are working with. Are they people known for integrity? And sometimes you need to know when or how to cut your losses. And that is once you have understood what intellectual properties are. I was saying something about knowing when to cut your losses. That is also very important. If you see that a client is not showing principle, is not being principled about what you are going to get out of this, then you do not need to go into businesses with them. But I must say again that advertising in general, this our business, it's a risky one. Even for us big agencies, if I may say so, there are times that my people will come to me, this thing that we are sending to clients, are we sure they will not take our ideas? And I say to them, it's an option, it's a choice. Put those ideas in your locker, they will die there. Or take the risk of taking it out and, you know, knowing the kind of, it's a risk, knowing the kind of people you work with, and having worked with them for a number of years, you know how they operate. So again, like I said, I mentioned earlier about relationship. Relationship doesn't stop with the briefing. Now, somebody will tell me, or one of the things that we try to do in our agency is to have people we call friends of the house. Now, if you have people like that, you can talk to them outside of the formal briefing session and ask them how things are. They will tell you, look, this thing, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just be cautious how you proceed. So one thing again that we do when we are not sure about the outcome of something is to have a framework. So you are not putting all your ideas on a table on the proposal. You say, we will do this. Have a framework that doesn't take all of your ideas, so that if they are interested, they can call you back and say, okay, we like this. How can we flesh it out? How can you put more details so we know how to go or how to proceed with it? So in summary, we ourselves need to learn more about intellectual property so we know what our rights are, and when they've been violated, we know what to do about it. Again, relationship, what kind of partners are you cultivating? Thank you.
Thank you. So Taiwo already says, thanks, Mrs. A. You're answering my question rightly. Now, one question I'd like to ask is, how has this industry impacted your personal life? So Mrs. A mentioned earlier that she used to get home at 11 p.m. And I'm sure I did too. In his traverse during the Bonvita period was in the north, maybe 2 weeks in a row. And so how has it impacted your personal lives, your families? How have you been able to balance things? I mean, work-life balance here. One of the challenges we have, especially with the females in the industry, is that when they get to a certain level, they drop out because they're unable to balance work-life, children, family with work. And advertising is a very, how will I say, tedious work. I mean, all jobs are tedious, but it has a way of taking a lot of your time. I remember one time we had to submit a proposal. I was at Insight at the time, and my director said, if we don't finish this, you won't go home. And I was very young. I just got married or so. And I couldn't get to Maryland until like past 1 p.m. And I didn't have a car at the time. So how have you been able to balance your work-family life? I'll start with ID here. And once ID is done, Kelechi can also speak to this briefly, so that Mrs. A can also tell us the female perspective.
Okay, sorry. It's funny you talk about this because, by the way, Bonvita was not just my only life. Cadbury, I spent just 3 years there. Let me start from the humble beginning at Guinness. You see, Guinness in itself, when you go for bar calls and all of that, I just got newly married and then sat and proud. We had to be in the bars all night and traveling, and with Androde and all of us running the rounds. Let me summarize this by saying this. If you are a career-minded person, I'd want to beg of you that when people talk about work-life balance, just take the life and turn it to spouse. Make it work-spouse balance. Because the spouse, if you don't have a supportive spouse, a spouse that will stand by you, life will be unbearable. So when it comes to career work, and when I sit down with my advertising friends, I always tease them, especially you guys in communications. Agency guys will tell you they are working so hard. Then what do you want a brand manager to say? That advertising is just one component of the entire piece. The guy doesn't have a life. But if you have a good spouse, it works. And so for me, my marriage was threatened at the early stage because my wife like you said, Agbons, newlywed, but you know, upfront we had to agree some of those things to say, hey, you need to help sort out this because I'll be in the field. And then the other part to it also is the spirit of camaraderie. There are times when you have some very rough times, and then you must have a support structure. Support structure will be like-minded friends who understand what you're doing, who can easily support you, support your spouse. So Ekunife Okoli, for instance, was not just my mentor. Okoli then in Guinness was also the chairman, not chairman, what do you call that, counselor or whatever for my marriage and my wedding. So Ekunife would easily be able to, any of my bosses will call into my wife and say, listen, we know we are giving you some very tough times. ID is going to be away for 2-3 weeks. It's part of the grind. And she understands, and she has understood. But if your boss is not into your life too, to support you, and it's all about teaching others, you cannot go alone. So you need a support structure to help you go through the journey that will eventually become life. And then work life can really balance.
Thank you. Kelechi, please.
Yeah, I think ID is said it. Discipline is important. I think some of the imbalance we bring to our lives in advertising comes from indiscipline, including myself. And sometimes, I mean, women talk about being stressed. So I take discipline from two angles. One is this: sometimes we don't work on the work when we're supposed to do it. We just keep it. We are creative people. We behave like journalists. We keep it and we wait until the last minute. So that's one part of the discipline. We need to look at that. The discipline from clients, which is client knows something is going to happen in the next 2 months and they brief you 1 week before the time. That's also part of a discipline. So you got to be able to really coast with your clients. One of the things I did when I was account director at MTN those days was I'll call Olu Akamu, who was, he used to call me Bebeto. He was Ronaldo in the midfield. I'll call him on Sunday. I'll call him on Sunday evening. So, Olu, what is the problem this next week? What are we facing? What are the plans? We'll talk for 60 minutes, whatever it is. So our week is laid ahead of us. Otherwise, he's going to be calling me by 6:30, 7 o'clock on Monday. And that might be a little bit unsettling for me. So we had organized ourselves in such a way that we knew what we're going to be facing. Things will come in, but we have a week organized. So discipline is particularly important in achieving that balance. There's a lady called Angela Okara. I worked with her. She was a manager when we were working for MTN. Angela will finish her work by 3 p.m. and go for choir practice. She runs an agency now. Ask her. And it was amazing to all of us. Angela, what's left? She had to-do list. She's done it. She's told clients what will happen in the next 2 days. It's just about discipline. So I think the first thing about work-life balance is discipline. And if you're going to keep late nights, tell your wife or your spouse, because sometimes agency people, we go drinking and we say this work is killing us, and we go keep late nights. We do it even when we know we could have done it a little bit better. So just being able to organize ourselves a little bit more helps with that work-life balance. ID's talked about camaraderie and teamwork. I think a little bit of exercise and meditation and God, some spirituality also helps, because sometimes we're just running around like really headless chicken. That's the truth, and including clients as well. But because we're in advertising. The other point I wanted to make about women, and I know Biodun is going to talk about this, is this. I think if you are getting married, it's an executive decision, or even for a man or for a woman, you need to be sure, and ID has hinted this, you need to be sure that your spouse understands what you do, the business you do. If you do not have a spouse who is understanding, then your executive decision has not been well executed, or the decision has not been quite well exercised. That's the last thing I'd like to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mrs. A.
Yeah, so I started this conversation about the fact that from day one, for young people, if you are setting out, you need to be sure what kind of partner you are ending up with. Is it someone that understands what you do and how you do it, and will be able to understand those days or those nights that you have to stay late at work? That's one of it. Also, I think technology has also helped in the sense that being a woman, you can't just leave your house and understand that, or let your spouse understand that he has to be eating bread and gari every day. You have to make preparations. And so that's why you don't lose sight, because you're an executive, you don't lose sight that you're a wife and a mom. So you make preparations also for those days of the week so that they are able to take care of themselves, even if you are not there. There are also people that are able to help, house helps or house managers, as some people call them. I had to go into that, and it wasn't always easy. There was a time we hired someone when we had our first child, and my husband had gone to work, and this woman just went bonkers, as in mental. I didn't know what to do. I had to call him back from work to come and deal with the situation. So the challenges come up, but at the end of the day, I think it's about you facing the bigger goal and not being a short-term person. Be a long-distance runner. When you are looking at the long distance, then you know that there will be situations that things will come up and you will need to address. It doesn't have to truncate your journey. It's just a bump, and you can go over it and survive it. Kelechi mentioned about discipline. It is very correct. Sometimes we don't do what we are meant to do when we are meant to do them, and so the job piles up, and of course you have to stay the night and ensure that things are done. Also, what I have noticed is that recently, some people, some clients, the young ones and sometimes middle level, have no clue at all whatsoever what they are meant to be doing. And so what happens is that they create more work for you. So you yourself have to be capable. You need to know what you are doing. So you need to do a lot of hand-holding so that they don't add to your work. You need to be able to tell them, this is the way to go. If we do it this way, we'll get to this destination. And you need to get them to trust you. When they trust you, then they can leave things in your hands and you can handle them and everybody is happy. So yeah, understanding relationship. In fact, I have a senior colleague who calls this ecology. That is how you manage your husband in such a way that he understands you. Exactly, he understands you and is able to support you all the way. And home support as well. Our first child had to stay with her grandma for like over a year because we couldn't handle her being around at that time. So when you have family support also, it helps, it goes a long way. So we are grateful to everyone who has been a support to us along the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. A. Interesting insights from the different perspectives, both from the male and the female perspective. I'd like to ask one question, and the Don himself is in the house, Mr. Langbe Omoile, and I'd like him to actually take this question, even though he's not on the panel. And the question is that, how do you manage recalcitrant clients that are downright rude and uncooperative? How do you manage clients that are downright rude and uncooperative?
Okay, hi Agbons. Thanks for calling me out. I thought that I would be a quiet observer this evening and listen to all the nudges that the big guns are giving. But thank you for calling me out.
Thank you, sir. We're happy to have you here.
I think first of all is you knowing that you're being professional. So you clearly must be professional and acting professionally constantly and having integrity. So when you have been professional and you've had integrity, then you have local standard, as the lawyers will say, to be able to manage clients. And some of the ways I've tried to do this is maintain that level of professionalism with these clients, such that I am therefore able to call them out when they are not behaving, so to speak, and not necessarily call them out in public, but at least have one-on-one conversations, especially if they're more senior people, to first of all clarify what your position is, and because you are in good stead, and then also point out areas where they are not living up to the terms of the partnership. I've also had occasion a few times to, especially if a client has been rude to a member of the team, and is to also have quiet conversations with either the client himself, or if it's a more senior person, also have call it out with that senior person to say that the team is not behaving right. So I think it's about having that mutual respect, but I think it comes from a position of where you as an agency side person has been professional, you've maintained integrity, and therefore you have the local standard to be able to call out such behaviors. But if you have not been professional, if you have been allowing deals between client and agency, then it becomes a lot more difficult to do that. So I think it's about being professional, having integrity, and having self-respect in having those conversations and showing that you are not a second-class citizen, so to speak, in the relationship.
Thank you, Mr. Langpe. That's the last question that will be taken. So we're bringing this to a close shortly. I'd like all three panel speakers to give us like their closing remarks for 3 minutes each, and then I'll do a summary. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the pen. Even if we're unable to take them now, we'll probably drop the answers in the Brief Faculty WhatsApp group. If you also have anything you'd like to say, like a comment or anything, just drop it in the chat pane and I'll follow it up. I'll start with ID. ID, would like to hear your closing remarks.
Well, I'll probably thank you once again for having me. That's to the faculty, grateful, and also to my fellow panelists. Thank you for joining in. Picked a lot of stuff, and I'm also going to make my own notes. One of the things I'd like to do is build on what Langpe said. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure you can have any recalcitrant client or you'll have a recalcitrant boss. Recalcitrant is a word that will go across whether a boss, manager, client, agency personnel. But two things stand out. Number one, you must maintain that level of professionalism. And the level of professionalism is a function of your mastery. If you are a master of your game and you're a master of what you know how to do best, people will not insult you. One of the things I've found is that when people feel that you are suboptimal, then they can rain abuses at you, on you. But if they know that this man or this woman is key to whatever I'm doing, they tend to respect you. Respect comes a bit more than it would, regardless of gender. The other thing that I really want to put on the table is please try as much as possible to upgrade yourself, your thinking, your knowledge. Read. Many of us in this industry just go with the tide. It cannot afford to be bad gist. It has to be gist coming from some knowledge and some perspective to drive a conviction. A conviction comes as a result of a perspective, but is built on knowledge. So seek knowledge while it can be found and make it the precipice of how you want to grow. Career is one thing, life is another, but at the end of the day, it's about a legacy. In whatever you're doing, seek and strive to build a legacy. What would you be remembered for? And how will you be remembered? It's very important. And to answer it, whenever you're in any situation, this is a key question. What is the honorable thing to do? And that's become your code. Wish you guys the best. Thank you for having me. And I'm grateful once again for the opportunity.
Thank you, ID. Please don't leave us yet. Mrs. A, your turn.
I had issues with my network, so I just came back on. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, okay, yes, we can hear you now. So can you give us your closing remarks, say in 3 minutes?
Oh, okay. It's been an interesting discussion, and what I would just like to say to everyone is that there are obstacles on the way, but it doesn't stop you from going discussion. It's about eyes on the ball. Look at the long term. Where do you want to get to? Make a plan and ensure you stick to that plan. I think I heard that I saying something about knowledge. It is too important. We have to learn. Advertising is a time, and make a plan to grow. And life takes you, you go there, have a plan and follow that plan through, and you get things done. Also, learn to get out of your comfort zone, to grow out of it, and be visible. Don't keep yourself in the background. Try to be visible when there's opportunity to do something. Come out and do it, and that's how you learn, that's how you grow. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Some of us are afraid to make mistakes. If you make mistakes, you grow from it. In fact, somebody says to me, fail fast. The faster you fail, then the faster you are able to get up and go. And lastly, in your organization, and this is something I heard from someone that has been useful to me. He says, don't be a donkey, because all you will do is walk. Don't be a sheep, as in don't be an idiot. And then don't be a fox, don't be a schemer, be an owl. An owl has 24 bones in its neck, and it's able to turn 360 degrees and see and be aware of things that are happening around it. So yeah, I hope that's been useful. Thank you very much.
Interesting, Mrs. A, very useful. Kelechi, can you please give us your closing remarks, after which Demola will give us thank you notes to everyone.
Thank you. I think my closing remarks have already been given by my distinguished panelists, so I take it as given. But just in case they missed a couple of these that I want to add, thanks ID and Biodun for the opportunity, and thanks to the Demola team for this. I think we need to really consider as practitioners, what is a Nigerian brand? Have we been able to create brands that are authentic to our environment, to our context that we are proud of? Some of the things that I've done lately in this latter part of my career that is speaking to some Nigerianness, there are bad things we do. Give me some much more better fulfillment than some of the things I did earlier for a couple of other brands. So I think that the future is what we make of it. We need to grow that future. We need to start thinking about how do we grow these brands. And I think it talks to what ID was saying. What's our legacy? What are we going to leave here with? And I'm sure ID, those when he's talking about legacy, he's talking about some of the things he's doing at Corporate Shepherds. It's good to talk about a lot of the things we've done for the Oyibo People's brands, his Cadbury, but I know he's thinking about what he's going to do for brands that are also grown, homegrown, that can scale. So I think it's a challenge to all of us to become a whole lot more ambitious to think about that. And corollary to that is to understand our context. Who is this person? Who are people? The marketing communication industry seems to be, especially those of us in advertising, we're very Lagos-based. We're very Ikeja, Ileki people. We don't even know where Shibri is in Lagos. We don't understand what their lives are in Agege, not to talk of Sokoto or Imo State or Akwa Ibom. So sometimes we are really busy doing mutual navel gazing and talking to ourselves, and we think we are really sharp. That is part of the knowledge gap that's missing with us. What do we know about our market? This market, 350 ethnic groups with 1,000 ethno-linguistic groups, etc., etc. All of Africa, what do we know about it? So I think knowledge is not just about reading all the books in marketing. It's also about knowledge of the space. So we need to read things, read people, understand what can help us grow. The third thing I'd like to mention is that I think all of us as an industry, we haven't been as creative as we ought to be. And I say this without fear of anybody killing me or doing that. We need to push our creativity. We need to get all of us to appreciate creativity. And creativity is about doing things in a new way or doing new things. Marketing in its whole basis is about building brands, but doing it with distinctiveness. It's about creativity. We can't do this work without creativity. So we need to keep also looking at our industry. How are we going to diversify it? Where's creativity coming into it? How can we be a little bit more innovative? So those are the things that occur to me as a closing shot. So thanks a lot for the opportunity. And I think it's been fun.
Thank you, Kelechi. Ademola, over to you. And immediately after Ademola, I'll give a summary before we finally say our goodbyes.
All right. Thank you so very much, sir. Mrs. A in particular, and well, not in particular, and ID, Mr. Nwosu. Essentially, why we started Brief Faculty is for this purpose, is to be able to sit at the feet of people like you and us, and as many of us who are opportunity to be there to listen to you, and we could build life and build our careers. So I feel so humbled. I feel very proud that this happened today, and like we have about 56 people right now who are connected and listening to you. So thank you so very much, SARS. I'm sure the next time we call on you, you would respond and be there for us. So thank you so much. Thank you also, Mr. Lankwe. I wish you would open your video so that we can see. You spoke behind cameras, and we particularly would have wanted to see your face, sir. So thank you so very much, everybody. So over to you, Agbons.
Okay, thank you, Ademola. I'll just give a summary just before we go. For those who are looking to join the Brief Faculty, please just drop your phone numbers and your names in the chat pane. We'll get to you after this session. Just to give, we've spoken, our panelists and our mentors have said a lot of things today. I'm particularly very impressed. And of course, I'm happy that I have the honor to host this session. It's been a great time here today. I'll just give a summary of some of the things we pick. Of course, these are not exhaustive. We've all, picked one or two things by ourselves, which may not be here in what I'm going to say. The first one is that we need to start looking at our business models as agencies. What we currently have as an agency business model may not be working for us clearly, and we need to revamp our current business model. The second thing is that we need to put our focus on outcomes. So let's not just look at how many bottles of how many ad campaigns will run, but like how many products are we really selling? So that's what's important to the business owners and the brand managers. They're not interested in the number of ads you run, but in the number of products that they're able to sell. So we need to put on our thinking caps and open our eyes, and be more creative in getting products to sell. And then work-life balance. So work-life balance is important, and one of our mentors actually termed it as work-spouse balance. So for you to be able to achieve work-life balance, you need to have supportive structure. Mrs. A has said that she had home managers. She also had a grandma who was very supportive. Mr. Heidi mentioned that he had a boss who was supportive. He had friends who he could call on. So you need a support structure. And then discipline is very important. One of the challenges we have in the industry is because we are indisciplined, and it actually shows in a lot of ways and in a lot of things that we do. Sometimes you give an art director work to do, and he's watching YouTube all through the day, and he only starts answering your brief maybe by 5 p.m., at which time he then has to sleep in the office. So we need to be very disciplined. And then the first thing about work-life balance, as everyone has mentioned here, is discipline. And then Mrs. A mentioned that we need to be a long distance runner. If you want to, as a long distance runner, you don't plan for just today, you plan for the future. You look through, you look at what's going to happen in the future, and then you plan ahead for it. And then most importantly, we need to start thinking about building authentic Nigerian brands. So it's not just enough for them to bring imported brands in here and then we work on them, but we need to look at building authentic Nigerian brands. And last but not the least is that knowledge is important. We need to open our eyes. We don't just have to sit in the offices and do our desktop research. We need to know what's happening in Mushin, what's happening in Uyo, what's happening, because at the end of the day, we're not only selling to the people in Ikeja, we're selling to the people all around Nigeria, and in some cases, pan-African. So it's been a pleasure meeting you all. It's been a pleasure hosting this today. And specifically, I want to say thank you to the mentors who have taken out time. I mean, this is very important, to have taken out 2 hours out of their daily schedule to be able to be with us today. And I hope that when we call on them another time, they will answer us. And I'd like to also thank the Senate of the Brief Faculty. They are all here. There's Ademola here, there's Peter here, there's Larry Basamta, and some others that I haven't mentioned. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone as well who, spent their time and took their data. We know that data is the new oil. To spend 2 hours here in this session today. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and Bye.
Thank you, Agbons. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Lampi. Goodbye. Thanks,
Yes,
Agbons.
bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.